Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Box, again with Dr. Ronald G. Taylor, sponsored by Novo Dia. And also want to just really say thank you for all the support and feedback that you've given us around these conversations. We try to keep them as authentic as possible. I'm a retired superintendent with about 30 years of public education experience that includes being a teacher, assistant principal, assistant superintendent, and also superintendent. And for those who are interested in reading some great stories about careers that are interesting and about the fight for instructional and educational integrity and equity, you can also feel free to look for my book. It's The Courage to Lead with Integrity for Equity, an authentic educational equity journey that's available everywhere. There's also, of course, a link on my LinkedIn.
Welcome back to Beyond the Box. We're just so fortunate today to have Rusty Gordon with us. Rusty Gordon serves as the Director of Pupil Services at Marysville Joint Unified School District in California, overseeing special education programs and student support services across the district. In this role, he is responsible for coordinating and managing special education services, ensuring compliance with federal and state regulations, IDEA, supervising coordinators of preschool, TK6, and middle school through adult transition special education programs, and collaborating with site administrators to ensure all students receive equitable access to high quality instruction. He reports directly to the Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services and works very closely with the district's broader curriculum and instruction initiatives. Now, Rusty and his work directly address some of our core themes here in Beyond the Box. We explore curriculum coherence, instructional implementation challenges, and the tension sometimes between boxed programs and customized solutions in education for our kids. We're so proud and happy to have Rusty here with us today. Rusty, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Norton or Dr. Taylor. I was made yourself like a doctor there. So
You can call me Ron, it's fine. Thank you so much.
thanks, Ron.
We love talking about curriculum development and how folks such as yourselves who are, seasoned leaders have to address issues with curriculum. I always tell folks that special educators and those who support special educators, they're right in the front of the line to go to heaven with early childhood educators, right? The patience and the support for kids who are the most vulnerable. And so, can you tell me a little bit about when you first stepped into your current role? How did you assess whether special ed programs were coherently connected to core instruction or whether they were functioning as a separate curriculum system?
But I think the first thing you look at is how many one-off curriculums people are asking for. And so when I come into a district, I've been in this district 2 years. In the previous district, I came into, and over the summer, I started getting requests from special education teachers for different curriculum. So I went to my assistant and I said, typically on a year, how many different requests do we do this? And she said, there's 135 teachers. Do you get 120 requests for different curriculums? And I just said, whoa, this is not such a good sustainable practice to do. So then I met with my assistant superintendent, kind of laid the groundwork. So we come into a district, kind of evaluate the curriculum that's being asked for, the curriculum that we have adopted through the school board, and then try to look at the gaps in that. And so in this district, when we came into it, the curriculum is established. There's not so many one-offs asked for. So we knew that the district had aligned the curriculum with special education. So now the next part of it is when you go out and visit school sites and talk to teachers, you really find out how much they know about that curriculum, how do they dig into it, how do they know where each grade level is at, do they have pacing guides throughout the district, or as in school site by school site, and how are they working with the gen ed teachers. So it really starts out as an observation and conversation with each teacher, to see how they're accessing the curriculum or how they're supporting the student, if it's a push in or if it's a pull out service, and how they're servicing the kids on the mild to moderate side. Then on the more extensive support needs side, we looked at the curriculum that we're doing, and we're lucky enough to have a line curriculum that we were using not only for our programs, but with the county programs too. So we had a unique learning systems approach to that. And so the unique learning curriculum for the ESN students was already in place. And so then the evaluation was how much are we using it? Are we using it to the fidelity that it's meant for? And to start looking at the training that our staff had and what training they needed, and what more training they needed. So you're looking at always, I mean, for me, it's always looking for gaps. If I have repeated questions across school sites around similar things, there's a training opportunity or there's a coaching opportunity to get people together to say, hey, let's maximize our efficiency in this curriculum and our services to students. So those are kind of the things that the overarching things you look at. Fortunate enough to have coordinators that are on school sites every day and working deeply with school sites. They're reporting back. We meet once a week for planning in sessions, and then we debrief almost probably 4 nights out of 5, from 4 to 5 o'clock. And there's a debrief period of what happened in that day, or if we're seeing the repeated themes across the district or school site. And then just the relationships with the principals and the staff on school sites. That we're here to support them. So the idea is, what is it that you need to make your job a little bit easier, but what is it you need to support the kids and to make them feel valued, and making progress towards their goals and objectives that they have set through the IEP process and through those things. And then just looking at the whole school site in general and seeing where they're at and what they need to keep progressing forward, making small changes along the way. We have so many initiatives that seemingly are pushed on us without sufficient enough support. So it's one of those things that a lot of times what we're doing is just highlighting what they're already doing and putting a vocabulary to it, and then creating that common vocabulary across the district. Because once that common vocabulary is across the district, and we go to one site to another, everybody's speaking the same language. It's not new. It doesn't feel different. It's, a lot of times we're just supporting these teachers and things that are already doing. We're really good about reinventing the same thing over and over again, just calling it something else. And so, as a teacher, when you're in your classroom, when you're delivering services, you can't be caught up sometimes in all those, those advancements of vocabulary. And so we really want to make sure that we're using the common language across the school site and across the district. And so that's what I really charge my staff with, is make sure that the language that we're using is common, is known, and those definitions are known throughout the, so if I go to one site to talk about one thing, it's not different when I go to the other site. There's a common focal point that how we get there. Each side may get there a little bit differently, but we're always going to the same end point, or true north, or what we're looking for. So those are the things that I really try to work with my staff with, to teach them how to just kind of make sure that vocabulary gets set. And that's what, it takes that alignment takes a minute or two. And once you start gathering momentum around that, it's very powerful. So we're in our second year of that here in this district, and we're getting the momentum. So it's good. It's good to see.
That is awesome. I wouldn't know anything about unfunded initiatives. I would never know anything about that. No, trust me, we see it. We see it everywhere. Sometimes,
It could be a series of podcasts.
unfunded initiatives, unfunded requirements, right? Mandates that don't come with a lot of funding sometimes. So kudos to you and your team. And so I was going to ask you a little bit about some of the folks who work with you and support you, and how your special ed coordinators and teachers, how do you make time for them to collaborate with some folks who are on the general education side? You talked about some of your late evening 4 out of 5 nights with your team, trying to rehash and go back and make sure that problems are being addressed. What about ensuring collaboration with the general ed folks?
Yeah, that's something that, within the district, they've has some systems set up. I know, like for PD, I have a PD committee that meets with the gen ed side of the house and a small group, and they go through all the ideas of professional development, and they run up through our union partners and our bargaining unit partners to make sure that they're on the same page and see what they're hearing. They bring their ideas to the table. They say what they let us know what they feel is deficient or where they need, some if we need some more input into that. So they come to a common understanding of what we're going to seek after and what we're going to do. But it's also a time for us to kind of share the direction that we're going and how to support them in that. The hardest part is how do you get everybody moving forward? And then when you have the professional development and then teachers can also like yourself not to go, how do you make something important enough that they all want to go to? And so, the hard part is that if the teacher chooses not to get a certain amount of extracurricular, outside of the school day, decides not to avail themselves to this training, how do you still, is what they need to do to keep moving forward? How do we get that information to them? So those are the things we struggle with, but those are also the things that we come together with on a monthly basis to try to plan out everything. So we're like right now we're sending out surveys for next year's broad scope PD. But we also do, and within our department, we do once a month about an hour long podcast or support systems that they could choose to come into or not to, and they're reimbursed for that time when they do it. And then we just subscribe to different podcasts and have learning sessions within the district office, or we pull up uh, our different law groups and things like that will give us the initiatives that are mandated, how to go about being in compliance with certain things. So we just got through with a IEP compliance training, a 3-part series. And so for our district, our school psychologists are usually the ones on the school site that are the person that kind of not oversees the compliance, but understands the compliance, helps direct them. And then our coordinators, when need be, go in and work with the school sites too. So our school psychologists will participate in those. The recordings are made available to everybody. So if they have a particular interest in that. So as you know, we get so much information that comes at us on a daily basis as we know what's important and what's not. And so, part of it is, where do we want to go with our learning and where does staff value that, hey, I need to know more about this or I need to know more about that. So one of the things that I do is I always look at the judgments that come out on a monthly basis. I read through all the judgments. And if one of them is particularly pertinent to something similar that happened within our district, I'll highlight that judgment. I'll send it out to my staff or send it out to a school psychologist that may have an interest in that or something similar is happening on their campus. Let's say, take a look at this. Judgment is similar to what you're experiencing, but let's make sure that we look at it. If you have any questions, get back to me. And so it's one of those things. Where does that individual want their knowledge to go? How much do they want to know? So we're going to take them along the journey as well. I'd rather have 12 school psychologists, 15 school psychologists that know as much as I do about compliance. The school site administrator, they have so many things they have to do. There's going to be a few that want to know that information, and a few is like, hey, I'm going to rely on, I'm going to rely on you. I'm going to rely on Randy or, Rusty or whoever's on my school site to be my first line of questions or when I have questions. But we're lifting the knowledge of all the staff up at the same time because those conversations are continually happening. And we have, people asking the right questions too. It's when they don't ask questions that I get concerned. It's like, oh, what's happening over here? I'd rather have the question and then do it than just silence and all of a sudden, hey, here's something that we need to look at.
Listen, every administrator who's led conversations and professional development with teachers, the worst thing to hear at the end of that is silence, right? Part, part of the success of the presentation is the conversation that follows, right? That's the organic part of that. So I agree 100%. And um, I love hearing about how you share that relevant information across your team when some folks think that what we do is static, right? It's not static, it's changing all the time, especially from your perspective. When a judgment happens, a rule changes, a policy is updated, maybe even state law could change, and you have to keep your team abreast. So I love that. Fantastic. So for the folks who are watching, they may not know that you were recognized as Special Educator Administrator of the Year at your former district or cut. So congratulations for that. And yeah, what was the specific curriculum or program change that shifted the outcomes that kind of made you blossom into getting this recognition? Do you recall anything specific, or and how did you know it was working?
That was on the Central Coast. I'm now in Northern California. So on the Central Coast, the first district I was in was a big school district of almost 17, 18,000 students, 20 school sites. And so one of the conversations we had all the way through COVID was, what if we served every student? What would it take to serve every student at the school of residence? Because there was very disjointed, one, bus routes, but two, there was, the community, wanted to push kids here and there. And so what happens is there's less ownership of a student. In my perspective, there's less ownership of the student on that school site to share that student. So what's it take to explore serving that student on this school site? So that was a 5-year work that I did in the previous district. And when I left, the first year was the first year that every student was going to be served on the school of residence, except for a specific strand of students that we kept a strand of autism students in a special day class, but it was very specific to their needs. But we had autism students throughout the district. There was just some specific criteria we set up for that. And at that school site, what we did is we just restructured the work of the special ed teachers. And so we created special ed teams on each school site. And so that's the work that I carried over into Orca. It's a smaller district. And so it took about 2 to 3 years to kind of get the smaller place to be able to do that. And so again, it was an uplifting of the school site administrators to understand special education at a higher level. And they already had a high level of work that they were already moving forward in the right direction. So it's just very small, scary mechanisms that we did. We developed a team. I built a team, brought some people in that could do the work. And then at that point, that's what really kind of propelled me into that position to get that award throughout the Central Coast. So it was actually it's a pretty humbling experience because it's all the way down from Ventura all the way into San Luis Obispo County along the coast of Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo County. So there's a lot of educators that are doing great work down there. And so it was nice to be recognized. But, thing is, as soon as you're recognized, work's not done. And so, so it's one of those things that as an educator, and this is kind of what I formulated during my 10 years of teaching in the classroom, was that as an administrator, it's not so much what you do, it's what you affect. And in terms of culture and climate at a school site, and you may not be able to put your name on specifically everything, but you start moving people in the right direction, and what carries on when you leave, what is Rusty's initiative. And so I've seen so many principals and administrators come through that started an initiative, but as soon as they leave, that initiative gets dropped. And so I was able to, early on in my career, kind of formulate that I don't need the recognition, but I want to start the movement. And so I'll carry through the movement. So that was always my mindset when I went into administration, is how do I affect not only what I do now, but when I leave this position or move to another position, how is that carried on way. Is it a solid program? Is it a solid initiative? It makes sense to keep carrying on, or is it just the initiative of the day? And so I just really didn't want to start. I didn't want to start an initiative of the day for a big bang and then just fizzle out. So I want to start those conversations to serve students where they're at and just keep moving them forward. And so that was what I was able to do, and that's what I've been able to do through my career. So
Oh, I love that. It's not what you do, it's what you affect. I'm gonna have to steal that one, Rusty. That's a great one. Thank you for that. And I wrote a book, um, and so we always try to end our time with guests talking about equity and integrity and some combination. My book is called The Courage to Lead with Integrity for Equity, and I write a lot about the kind of the thread of educational equity throughout my career, both personally and professionally. And so for me, one of the stories that I've shared with folks who are part of the executive training and the cohorts that I lead is about the unintended actions that result in inequitable pieces for our kids. Is how sometimes when we lead school districts, we find inequities that no one knew existed, right? We might find that several teachers found different online resources that they're using for their kids that they love and the kids love and maybe even the parents love. But now you have so many teachers on the same grade level teaching the same courses, but with different materials because we're always being advertised curriculum materials, right? And so sometimes you have to go in and examine all that stuff and try to make coherence so that all the kids are learning from similar materials, similar schedules, and things like that when they're in the same grades. And so, to talk a little bit about curriculum coherence from your perspective, how do you translate that curriculum coherence into outcomes that families and communities actually care about, whether it be college and career readiness or graduation rates, or even a sense of belonging for kids who are exceptional? Any thoughts on that?
that's one of the ones that it's an interesting topic, but it's also as I work with teachers that are coming up, and I work with new teachers, and like over 50 decided to go back and get her teaching credential. She was a preschool teacher, paraeducator, had an emergency credential. She said, "What the heck? I'm gonna go get my, full credential." And just kind of watching her through this guidance, and uh, it's interesting because I used to lecture for a friend of mine at the university right after the March 15th deadline in California, so deadline for notary elects and all those things. So I go in there and talk just about perspective of what's happening in education and things like that. And so the one thing I always say that as an educator, give yourself grace, but the first 2 years you're an educator, you're going to try things that don't land. And so you talk about coherence, we have to not only the art and the science of the education piece, um, things that Rusty did in his first 2 years, I won't admit to anymore because I tried to be the teacher that I had in seventh grade that I thought that I idolized, but it wasn't my personality, it was their personality. So when I tried it on, it didn't make sense. And the kids are looking at me like, "What are you doing, Gordon?" And so it was one of those things that you evolve into your own personality, your own thing. So now when you get curriculum, and I had just some experiences where I had grade level, when we did intervention in grade level, and we meet as teachers at a certain grade level, and I may not be good at teaching fractions as well as somebody that could teach, but I could teach finding for X or solving the algebraic equation like nobody's business. I can explain it in three different ways, upside down and backwards. And so when we started looking at that, it's like, okay, what is it true to yourself? And the hardest part about getting that coherence throughout the process is that when we go in our classroom, sometimes the doors get shut and we don't collaborate. So you touched on collaboration. I was fortunate enough and early in my career to have a very collaborative team when I taught second grade, when I taught fifth grade. And so when we looked at students that, we did our summative testing and we did all those things, and the students that missed one concept, we broke them up for 2 or 3 weeks around that topic. But we also, the other two teachers taught different topics within the math or English. And so we were able to kind of just give an exposure to those kids that was intensified during those times that we did that. And so now the question is, how does that translate to school site? Well, we have so many initiatives that come down from state and the federal level. Our time is so scripted now. Before we had 90 minutes for English arts, and we went into a fifth grade classroom and said, look, we'd like to do 25 minutes 3 days a week to do this intervention around English language arts, and we do the same thing with math. And so those were the things that we did. We had that opportunity to do that. Now it's like, we have a PE, so many minutes in PE, the scripted, all these things that I keep eating us. Then we have specials come in. And so some days it's like I'm teaching for 35 minutes and my kids are moving for the rest of the day, and I bring it back in the end of the day. I'm supposed to introduce a new concept. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Right. So the concept that I'm going to introduce at the end of the day is a revisit to different topics. And so it's just that coherence is how do you get that through a school site to get them on the same level, but also throughout the grade level, throughout the district, it's tough. I mean, each school site's got to take on their own personality and the personality of the staff there to get to that. And so they help define that. Keeping in mind that the district overall has an overarching conversation around it, that common language, as long as it's fitting into that common language and the initiatives that are set throughout the district and is going towards that true north. It's not a straight line. We know that. And so as long as we're going to get there, at some point we're going to get there. So it's just real interesting to see it. I see it from, 25 plus years later from my wife's perspective. She was, in her first years of teaching. And then you're her own self-doubt, but then like you're going through what every teacher goes through. It's okay. Right. And so you're going to be fine.
Yes.
There's a level for the kids. It was left for them to succeed. And that's what you keep doing, and so those are
Yeah.
the things that we really want to make sure that we get out to our staff. So it's been an interesting journey. And, one of the stories I tell is one of my first teaching jobs. I hooked up with a special gen education teacher. He's still a good friend of mine today. He's one of the people that I go to when I need to be hit upside the head. We'll say, hey, snap out of it, get right. And it's one of those things. We started a small book club within our school site. And if you wanted to take part of it, you did. And if you didn't, it's fine. And the gentleman named Don Miller wrote a book, and he's now a business associate that he does business advising for businesses and small businesses and things like that. He had a podcast that pretty well know, but 25 years ago, he wrote a book called To Own a Dragon. And so to own a dragon to him is his journey as a young man growing up without a father. But his whole process was, my mom could have told me every time she brought a man home or brought a man around, this is going to be your new father. This is going to be the new man of the house. He said, I would have been better off if she said, I'm going to get you a dragon for Christmas, or I'm going to own a dragon, because it was one of those things. And so what we took out of that was that we get students every day. We don't know what happens at home. And so when we get them today, we have them today. What do we do with them today when they're in front of us? How do we treat them? How do we respect them? How do we get them through the day sometimes? Not knowing what they went through yesterday and last night. And so that was a shift in perspective for a lot of folks. And we started that little conversation 20, 25 years ago. And it's just one of those things that, the fruition of it is that school site, that school district has evolved that conversation from 5 of us that talked about it. And I have left, and 3 of the other teachers left. There's only 2 teachers from that original conversation still on that school site. But it's survived superintendent changes and everything else. And it's become part of the culture and the climate of that school site or that school district, because the staff said, this is what we're going to do. And then when you get a leader that comes in and says, yeah, this is the right thing to do, I'm going to get out of the way. Sometimes it's the best thing you do as a leader to get out of people's way. And so, or, I'm gonna, and what other resources do you need? How do I get you the resources? So they fostered that development. It's become part of the culture of that school district. And so that was one of the things that we started with. That was just that whole thing of, we don't know who the students are that we're getting, on, in the day. We're part of the community, so we know a little bit more about them sometimes. But, that student that comes in that sleeps in my first period of class, why is he doing that? Well, I mean, we all have stories, work till midnight, got off school, I worked from 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night to midnight. My parents were arguing. I had to go pick up my mom because she, whatever, a lot of nonsense that occurred. We slept in the car last night, whatever. My dad was in Afghanistan. My dad was deployed. My dad, all these things that, we don't know the intricacies of all these things. They come out later. But if you finish the child in that home, we're not doing that child any favors. So, that was one of the things. The full circle is his son now is a teacher and has that philosophy. And so as a 22-year-old, 23, 24-year-old, first, second year teacher, he's thriving in that with that mindset that he saw his dad have for 20 plus years, 25 years. So that second generation of teachers, it is now like, man, this is something cool. And so it's just that conversation that started, you never know where those conversations go. So that's been a pretty powerful, in the way I serve the people that I hire and develop them too, because really what I'm doing is I'm always hiring somebody to take my job. And so, what would happen if, right? It's
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I mean, that is just so powerful. I write about that a little bit in my book too. Just the one of the first theories that we learn as college kids trying to become teachers is Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory, right? And we learn about how kids have to, how any of us, when we feel protected and when we feel safe and when we've had food in our bellies and enough water, all of those physiological pieces, you learn better when those needs are met, and also being able to recognize a kid in a space that those needs are not being met, right? They're not a bad kid because their environment outside of the school is making it more difficult for them. And so I think that is just phenomenal that, the ideas of teachers in your former space have blossomed into entire concept for a school district, right? That's really about understanding kids and not demonizing them for the circumstances that they come out of. That's a great way for us to end our time together. Thank you so much, Rusty, for spending some time with us. We really enjoyed it.
it's my pleasure. That anytime you want to talk, then
Awesome. Well, it sounds like we need to have your wife on as well, huh?
yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, she's a Southern gal, so she'd talk your ear off for sure.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you one again for joining Beyond the Box. And we if you want to learn more about Rusty's journey, you can always, I'm sure, find him on LinkedIn and learn more about his very successful career supporting kids, some of the most vulnerable kids in our populations. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
have a great day, everybody.